This is the Editor's Half Hour. Step into the life of an editor for 30 minutes as we discuss the craft of editing, industry trends, and editorial resources. Your host is co-founder and CEO of Peak Publishing Inc., Nadia Jaja Pupa. She is experienced in all facets of the publishing industry, from editing to design, and works with corporate clients and self-published authors. Nadia and her guests are about to share powerful insights and stories on what it takes to be an editor. And this is your host, Nadia Jaja Pupa.
Welcome, listeners, to the Editor's Half Hour. You have arrived to the episode to finally discuss medical editing. This is something I've been wanting to cover for quite some time on the podcast. So this episode's conversation is truly a special one. Medical and scientific editing, it truly sits at the intersection of language, ethics, and real-world impact. A few people have shaped that space thoughtfully, but few have, as Barbara Gastel has, and that's who my guest is today. Barbara is amazing. This episode, we are going to explore what it means to edit responsibly in medicine, how the role of editors continues to evolve, and why clarity, credibility, and care matter more than ever in scientific communication. And so, yes, I have Barbara Gastel. She is truly amazing. She is a physician, author, and internationally recognized expert in medical and scientific communication. I couldn't ask for anyone better than Barbara to be on this episode. Truly the queen of scientific editing, medical editing. She's also the author of How to Write and Publish a Scientific Paper. But her most recent publication, which I'm holding up right now, is Medical Editing. And it has a long subtitle, and it's published by the University of Chicago Press. And that is the book that is the book that we are all so excited about. It is truly a foundational text. And so we are going to dive right into that today, and I don't want to waste another minute. So Barbara, please, welcome. Please introduce yourself. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm really flattered that you invited me. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Barbara Gastel. I'm a medical editor. I am a faculty member. I'm a professor at Texas A&M University. And one of the main things I do is direct our graduate program in science and technology journalism. And something I do in that program is teach science editing. I also teach at our medical school. I'm an MD by training and also have a master's degree in public health. And also relevant to this episode, I teach in the University of Chicago certificate program in medical writing and editing. And in particular, I teach the course in substantive editing.
That's amazing. Truly influential in this world with the way you approach, the way that you're, break it down in the book. So we're going to just talk about the book right now, and then we'll get into the weeds later with this interview. And earlier I have the book now in front of me. I was holding it up so I couldn't read the subtitle, but the subtitle is A Guide to Learning the Craft and Building Your Career. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss. So let's talk about the book. What motivated you to write this book? Did you feel that there was a gap that you felt that was in the field that you wanted to fill?
I sort of wrote the book that I wish I had either when I started in this field or when I started teaching in this field. Teaching in this field, I had drawn on various materials and brought them together and realized I had the makings of the book, and it was a nice story behind being able to do the book. For a book, just as for a scientific paper or a magazine article, it's important to find the right fit, the right publisher. And I had long admired the University of Chicago Press series in writing, editing, and publishing, and thought, well, this would be a good fit. And I went so far as to start drafting a proposal, but it just sort of sat there. And then through my teaching in the University of Chicago program, heard that they were looking for more authors for the series. And I was connected with Mary Lauer, who's a near legendary editor. She edits the series. She also is main editor for the current edition of the Chicago Style Manual. And so can't get much more of an expert than that. And so we had a Zoom call, I think more than an hour, talked about various ideas. And I mentioned the possibility of a science editing book. And she had the idea of making it more specifically medical editing, which I was delighted with. And so went in that direction. But I should mention that much about the book also applies to science editing more generally. So I think the book can be useful not only to medical editors or prospective medical editors, but also to people more generally in science editing or technical editing.
This is such a wonderful book, and just diving into it and the bigger scope and seeing how the structure is set up with the table of contents, it was really cool. And I was looking at it and I thought, oh, this is interesting. You even addressed this in the book as to why you chose to include the resources section earlier in the book than later in the book that you typically see for these types of things. So let's talk about that. What were some thoughts that went through your mind when you were creating the structure for the book to put this resources so front and center early in the book?
Well, my feeling is that for a medical editor, resources aren't just something extra. They're central to this kind of work and draw on them every day. And so I felt it was really important to introduce things such as standard style manuals and organizations early in the book, and then they'd be referred to throughout the book. And I have to say, I think I have good precedent in this regard. One of my favorite books to teach from is the Copy Editor's Handbook. And that also has a resource chapter quite early.
Okay. And then you liked that. So you thought, okay, this is what you want to do for yours. I love that idea. So obviously this book covers a variety of things, punctuation to ethics. How did you decide, I guess, what to include? That's the hard part, right? And then I guess what surprised you the most while you were, organizing the structure when you were like, oh, maybe I should, put those resources at the beginning, or, other sort of decisions that maybe came about.
Right. And I think its structure wasn't that much of a challenge. I think it's helpful to teach something before you write the book about it. And so I think the structure tended to be fairly similar to teaching I had done. So there were some minor adaptations, but I'd say no real surprises regarding the structure. I think structure does evolve. For example, there was one chapter that ended up being very long, and so I broke that into 2 chapters. It was the one on substantive editing, and so I broke out the material on conference and career communications into a separate chapter. But I found the structure wasn't that much of a challenge.
Yeah. It's really more logical in a way because you're coming at this from a professor perspective. You teach this material, so I can see that. So the other things that really struck out at me when I was reading the book were your little, you scattered some of your humor throughout the book, which I totally appreciate. I think you make it fun. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your sense of humor and how you're able to interject it into a topic of medical editing, which is so unexpected. And it's like just cute things. Like I think that my favorite was on I even noted it. I think it was page 152, which is the common ailments, quote unquote ailments of medical application essays. And you used like acne to describe like grammar issues. It's so funny. I love it's just creative. I love that.
Right, and that came from teaching too.
Yeah.
We have at A&M, there's at the College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences, where my main appointment is, there is a program, a master's degree program that's sort of a transition from bachelor's to professional school, and most of the people in the program are aiming to apply to veterinary school or medical school or other health professional school. And in one of their courses, they have me give a two-part series. One part is mainly on how to write a professional school application essay. And then they have a chance to do drafts. And the second one is largely on how to revise. And so I talk about different kinds of problems. And I thought, wow, since these people are aiming for biomedical careers, rather than just describing the problems, why don't I give them medical names? So acne for mechanical problems, anencephaly if there's not really a beginning, dislocations if things are sort of out of place, or anemia if there aren't concrete details, and so forth. So I had this material and I thought, why don't I put this in here?
I love it. I love it. It just cracked me up because you can actually apply that to all things, not just medical. But apply like I'm just laughing, thinking, imagining myself telling a client, "Oh, your manuscript is a little anemic." Just I never would do that, but it just cracked me up. I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, that was great. Okay, so we want to get into specifics, right? But before we do, are there let's just, tackle this question head on, which is common misconceptions. What are some that you have come across in your whether it's been your career or through teaching that we can address right from the get-go on what it takes to be a medical editor?
Right. I think, I guess one common misconception is that there is only one path to being an editor, medical editor, or that one background is better. I mean, there's been debates for decades that, to be a really good medical editor, you should have a health science background, or a really good medical editor would have a background in English or journalism. But as you look around, there are wonderful editors from all kinds of backgrounds in the medical field. And I think the important thing is not what background one begins with, but how you round out that background. And so that's one of the major misconceptions. I think another misconception is that you go into editing if you're reclusive and you don't have people skills and don't want to interact with people. But as I hope is clear from the book, an important aspect of medical editing is the author-editor relationship. And I think the
Absolutely.
best editors I know are empathetic and relate well with other people.
I love that. That's a great, great perspective because I didn't even think about the different backgrounds because it's one of those things that I just assume I need to have like a degree in biology, microbiology. I mean, I don't know anything that I wanted to get into. You think that you need that specialized education, but um, if somebody did want to pursue a career in this path, I mean, taking a course or taking a certificate or going through a certificate program um, would probably be a really great place to start, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would say, that would be a good place to start, sort of whichever end you're coming from, and then filling things in on your own. For example, if you're coming from a science background, then there are resources out there more on editing. I mean, I'd suggest, for example, reading the copy editor's handbook and
Yeah.
doing this kind of thing. If you're coming from, let's say, an English or journalism background, perhaps taking a medical terminology course, or this is a conflict of interest, but I'm the person who prepared the self-study module on medical terminology for the American Medical Writers Association. So using
Wow.
that or a book, possibly, now there are lots of online courses for credit or non-credit, maybe taking an epidemiology course or other course. So I think rounding out one's background. And then I think something really wonderful is that medical editing is really a field that you're always learning on the job. You're always exposed to new things. And so you build up a fund of knowledge through the work itself.
Yeah, I love that because that's also very meaningful for editors to hear that you are constantly learning. There's always going to be new things that appear. Um, so let's get into the ethical sides. There's ethical issues that exist. And you dedicated an entire chapter to covering the ethics. What is one ethical challenge that you think editors should probably prepare for who are medical editors now? What do you think that they deal with?
Well, I'd say this is one they're probably fairly familiar with is, and probably the most common is, I would say, inadvertent plagiarism. That I don't run across many editors who are authors who are trying to plagiarize, but often one of two kinds of things come up. One is they're just careless, that maybe they paste something from elsewhere and then they come back and they think it's theirs and forget
Ugh.
it. Or sometimes people who are struggling with the language, either if they're not native speakers of English or native speakers who don't write well, they'll, see something, so well said and just sort of put it in and think it's okay. Or even cross-cultural issues in that, in some cultures traditionally, it's okay to just sort of, yeah, you like my book, so take a couple paragraphs and put it in your article. So I think for all those reasons, and my feeling is again that most authors who have something that's plagiarized or bordering on plagiarized, they're not trying to get away with something. It's sort of an honest mistake. So my feeling is to approach it not in a confrontational manner, but, sort of more, well, I noticed this is the same as this. What was going on here? And then work together to, normally it would be paraphrase it, in some cases quote it.
I love this. And this is a beautiful segue into working with authors, the authors who are the subject matter experts in these situations, and how we communicate, how medical editors should communicate with the authors. And like you said, it's probably the wrong thing. And I love that you said it explicitly in the book to approach any scenario in an accusatory way. There's no reason for an editor to accuse the author of plagiarism. You don't want to just jump out and be like, this is plagiarized. It's understanding that it could have been an honest mistake. It could have been a little bit of a sloppy error. But let's get into this. Let's get into this. It is more collaborative, I feel, than it would be in comparison to other forms of editing. If it's a straight up line edit, copy edit, there is less of a collaboration there. Collaborative conversations are usually more for the developmental editor. So let's talk about the medical editor, because I can see how it could be more collaborative even in a copy edit, right? Or am I wrong there? What do you think?
I think even in some copy edits, I'd say at the copy editing's stage or phase, there's less collaboration, but still there may be some querying and so forth. And in medical editing, I think one niche, and one of my favorites, is that of an author's editor who actually works with the author before submission of a journal article or chapter or grant proposal. And that, I think, can be a real partnership. And it's, I think, very helpful to frame it as a partnership and to frame it as, that like a consultancy. You're basically editorial consultant to the author, and you're not there to rewrite or belittle or correct the author, but you're there to help them communicate as effectively as they can, and therefore to achieve their objectives, including getting their paper or their grant accepted and communicating the message to the reader. Because I think for really, for all editors or editors of this type, you're really serving various people, but both the author and the reader. And I think always keeping the reader in mind. And I think often a tactful and effective way to frame a query is to frame it in terms of the reader, not like, I didn't understand this, or, I don't know what this means, but for example, will your reader, know what this is? If not, I suggest defining it.
I like that. Oh, I like that approach. And I have to just add for listeners to hear this. Her section on querying authors is fantastic. I was not expecting that in this book. I don't know why I wasn't, but when I looked, I'm like, oh, because I don't do medical editing. So it was really eye-opening for me to see, how do you address, or when you flag things, how do you address them without being accusatory, without sounding like you're attacking the author. But I love how when you rephrase it that way, like, will the reader understand this? Or is this topic, should they have already known this? Is this too fundamental or for them in the context of this essay or article? So I think there are ways that editors can learn from this and really understand that there's a better way to flag content for various reasons. So this is also making me think about the entire process for like article publications, periodicals, scientific journals. You broke it down in the book in a very beautiful, organized way, just a simple table of the peer review process and how that comes into play as part of the editorial, and then there's production. And so I think breaking it down is so valuable and simplified so that editors understand where they fall in that role and in that process. So let's talk about that too. When you were breaking it down, where do you see, and where did you fall early in your career? Did you see all all levels, or where did it feel that the bottleneck, I guess is what I'm getting at. Where did you feel that those pressure points happen in the process? Was it the peer review process that would stall?
Right. Yeah. I'm really not sure. I think it's a case by case basis. So I think, at different times there's, so I'm not sure there's any one answer to that.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on if there were any pre-existing issues there, and then like what would stall the process. So yeah, so let's just go back to the editors who want to learn and want to deepen their competence in medical editing. So what would you say, what skills matter most beyond the grammar and style?
Right. I think actually interpersonal skills are, as noted again, depending on the type of job, you may have more or less interaction, but interpersonal skills, I think, developing some subject matter knowledge. I think just the ability to keep learning, both learning the science and medicine, learning the technology, learning the norms in the field. A sense of humor is helpful too.
I know, I love it. I think a sense of humor, because you see, I mean, if you think about the years of experience that you have, you must have identified specific patterns or, typical issues that you've seen, or not issues, but problematic things that you've discovered in whether it's the writing styles or, like I mentioned, that peer review process, or habits, So can you share any, or do any come to mind, like specific habits, professional behaviors that you have seen almost consistently among medical editors or writers?
I'm not sure these exact habits, but I think usually, medical editors, I think one is just, a love of learning, wanting to always be learning, and enthusiasm, and I think a sense of service that this is editing that can really make a difference ultimately in patients' lives.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I have a question about I know we skipped ahead and we're jumping around a little bit here, but there was something that cracked me up in the ethical section on professional
Okay.
boundaries. So ethics extend beyond, the content. I mean, it's the relationship that we've been this is our overall theme right now, really, in this episode is really that author editor relationship. And, in the book, you said, and this happens with journalists, receiving gifts from a business owner, if you're covering an article about like a store or something and they try to give you free gifts, that could become unethical there or a conflict of interest. So, in the book, you said that you have witnessed or heard about some of these like highly unethical gifts that authors were gifting editors. And then you said something in the book about you've heard about an editor who received a lingerie gift card. J- I just cracked up. I was like not expecting to see that in this book, but that stuff happens. So do you bring this up when you teach, do you cover ethics as a topic and then do you bring this up as an example of something unethical?
Right. Yes. No, I do cover ethics. In fact, I use cases, that are fictionalized but based on
Okay.
real examples. And in the book, there are, the cases and discussion of them. And this was a real example. I think there are situations where it's fine to accept small gifts. Let's say you're an
Right.
author's editor and working with an author, and let's say their paper gets accepted, their grant accepted. They may send you flowers, they may give you candy, and something like
Right.
that. I think is appropriate, and it would, you know, to turn it down and say this is unethical. I think would not be good for the relationship. But occasionally there are authors who don't understand what's considered an appropriate gift and what's not. And this was
Right.
a colleague of mine told me about the story you referred to. And this was somebody from, another culture who didn't really know. And maybe they asked, well, they asked someone, what's a nice gift to give someone or something like that.
Mm.
And this was not only just any editor, this was an editor who was, I would describe her as late middle-aged and very religious
Oh
and
my
the
God.
kind of person that I would never even think of telling, let's say, an off-color joke to or anything.
Oh my
And
God.
she, this very grateful author gave her a gift certificate to Victoria's Secret.
I had a feeling.
And so the question was how to handle that. And
Yeah.
I
How do
think
you handle it?
a lot of times if you're in an awkward situation, it's helpful to appeal to authority. So she talked with her supervisor and she said that, the supervisor would talk and the supervisor expressed great appreciation, said we're very pleased, but said something about, our institution has a policy, that, our editors can't accept large give and left it at that.
Left it
But
at that. That's very professional way to handle that. But I do think that that's worth mentioning because we don't know that. It was surprising to me when I read that and thought, oh my God, I can absolutely see how that could happen, especially in this field where people do genuinely appreciate the help that editors provide, but then to take it a step further or to do extremely large gifts or inappropriate or bordering on awkwardness there, it's interesting that mentioned that on the ethics area. So we do have to wrap this up. Um, and I don't want to, but while you were talking about giving gifts, I thought, you know, I should probably do a shameless plug for my affirmation cards for editors. That would be a good gift, right? That's a highly appropriate,
oh
perfect
yes,
gift
right.
for an editor if a writer wanted to purchase those. So I thought I should just plug that in there. But anyway, so we do need to wrap this up. And we did cover a lot here, but I do think that there's more. So, listeners, if you do want to continue to hear more about our conversation on ethics, we can continue on that. I still have more questions there. Um, a little bit of the place of AI in this industry and how it's affecting articles, how it's affecting the editor's perspective. I want to hear Barbara's opinions on this. And so we will cover that in our exclusive episode, which is accessible through my Patreon. If you join as a Patreon supporter, as a sneak peek, quote unquote peek, as in peak publishing, if you join for $5 a month, you get access to all of the exclusive content. So we will continue that. But before we officially end this interview, Barbara, what are some closing thoughts? What is some reflection or perspective that you could provide in general for somebody who is just unsure about entering this side of editing? What sort of thoughts or words of encouragement can you share?
Right. No, I mean, I think it's a great field. It's, as I mentioned in the book, really a helping profession and something we're always learning. And I know sometimes people are concerned that it is a changing field, but it's been a changing field as long as I've been in it. I mean, I started out with, paper and pencil editing before there was online editing, and we wondered, what's this going to mean for editing? But it's an evolving field, but I encourage you to explore the field because I think there are lots of good opportunities in it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Barbara. We will continue our conversation in the exclusive interview. Thank you again.
Thanks. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Editor's Half Hour. This podcast is your go-to resource for editorial trends, opening the discussion for new ideas through the real-life stories of editors. For more information about Nadia Jaja Pupa and her business, visit peakpublishing.com. That's PIQUE publishing.com. And remember to subscribe and follow the Editor's Half Hour wherever you get your podcasts.